what if one of the most powerful earthquakes in India's history happened all over again, but today? This isn't a question of if, but when. And we're not talking about some disaster movie here. We're diving into an official, incredibly detailed damage scenario for the state of Bihar. And it's all based on a very real and truly catastrophic earthquake that happened back in 1934. So let's just start with a number that will absolutely stop you in your tracks. 222,337. That's the official projection for how many people could die if a quake like the 1934 one hit Bihar at night, when most people are at home asleep. This one number really sets the stakes and shows you why this is an urgent present-day concern. And the devastation? It wouldn't just be the tragic loss of life. The very same report projects that a full 20%, 1/5 of all homes in Bihar, would be so badly damaged they'd need to be completely rebuilt from the ground up. We're talking millions of homes turned to rubble, millions of people left with nothing. The scale is it's hard to even wrap your head around. And just so we're clear, this isn't some wild guess. This is a direct warning from the top. The vice chairman of Bihar's own disaster management authority says it right here. A repeat of 1934 would be catastrophic. Why? Well, because of the huge increase in population and all the vulnerable buildings that have gone up since then. It's a recipe for a much, much bigger disaster. Okay, so to really get a handle on what the future might hold, we have to look back at the past. This entire chilling forecast is built on a real event, the Great Bihar-Nepal earthquake of 1934. So let's take a look at what happened back then, because it casts a very, very long shadow over today. Yeah, this region has a long and violent history with earthquakes. It wasn't just a one-time thing. There was a massive quake back in 1833. Then came the big one in 1934, a magnitude 8.4 monster. And then even as recently as 1988, there was another powerful reminder. This timeline shows a clear, repeating pattern. The 1934 quake wasn't some random fluke. It's the known threat this region lives with. And just look at this map. This shows you the sheer power we're dealing with. It's the original map from 1934, showing the intensity of the shaking. Each of those colored bands shows a different level of violence. And that huge red zone in the middle, that's where the most extreme destruction happened. It stretched for hundreds of kilometers, just wiping out a massive part of North Bihar. Now, this comparison is just staggering. Back in 1934, just over 7,000 people lost their lives in India, a horrible tragedy. But if that same event were to happen today, the number explodes to over 222,000. And the reason is simple: population density. So many more people living in more buildings, many of which just aren't built to withstand that kind of shaking. So, that was the past. Let's switch gears and talk about right now. We're moving from history to modern-day risk assessment. Because scientists and officials aren't just looking backwards. They're using all that data to map out exactly where the biggest dangers are today. And here it is. This is the official earthquake hazard zoning map for Bihar. Think of it as the modern version of that 1934 map we just saw. The different colors aren't just for show. They divide the entire state into zones of moderate, high, and, well, very high danger. Now, to really understand that map, you gotta know what these zones mean. It's pretty straightforward. Zone 3 is moderate risk. Zone 4 is high risk. But it's Zone 5, that's the one we really need to pay attention to. That's the very high damage risk zone. This is where the most catastrophic level of shaking is not just possible, but probable. And this is where it gets personal. Is your city on the list? 8 districts in Bihar are right in the middle of this highest risk category, Seismic Zone 5, the red zone. If you live in Sitamarhi, Madhubani, Darbhanga, Saharsa, Supal, Madhepura, Araria, or Kishanganj, you are officially in the area with the absolute greatest potential for catastrophic damage. Okay, so we know where the risk is highest, but why is the damage expected to be so bad? Well, the answer isn't just about what's happening under the ground, it's about the walls that are all around us. Let's dig into why some buildings are so much more likely to collapse. The official report breaks buildings down into a few simple types. You've got Type A. These are houses made of mud, clay, things like that. They're the most vulnerable. Then you have Type B, which are your standard brick buildings, still considered vulnerable. It's not until you get to Type C, structures with reinforced concrete, that you start to see real resistance. The type of house you're in has direct link to how safe you are.
And when the shaking actually starts, damage happens on a scale. It's measured in 5 grades. It can start small with slight damage, just fine cracks. But it ramps up fast to destruction, where parts of a building fall down, and finally, total collapse. That difference between a building that cracks and one that completely fails, well, that's the difference between life and death. So when you put all of that together, the outlook for Bihar is pretty grim. Look at this chart. It visualizes the official numbers. A full 20% of homes are projected to suffer the worst kind of damage, requiring total reconstruction. Another 45% would need major repairs. So that's a staggering 65%. Almost 2/3 of all homes in the state would be either significantly damaged or completely destroyed.
And I want to be crystal clear here. Every number, every single map, every projection we've been looking at, it all comes directly from official sources, the government of Bihar and the Bihar State Disaster Management Authority. This is their own data, their own analysis, their own warning to everyone. Hearing about a risk this big can feel completely overwhelming, but facing it is also the first step toward doing something about it. So now, let's pivot. Let's move from the scale of the problem to what the solutions look like. How do we turn this incredible risk into real, tangible readiness? So that brings us to the most important question, right? When you're staring down a threat of this magnitude, what does being prepared actually look like in the real world? It's so much more than just having a first aid kit in your closet. It's about a whole system of safety. Well, according to experts who study this stuff around the world, the answer is what's called comprehensive seismic risk reduction. It's basically an all-in approach. It means you can't just have strong buildings. You also need people who are trained on what to do, and you need plans in place that are designed to work even when everything is in chaos. Hospitals are a perfect example of this. For a hospital to actually work during a disaster, it needs way more than just strong walls. It needs regular drills, plans for a sudden flood of patients, backup communications, and a staff that is trained and ready to respond. All these pieces have to work together perfectly. And that's really the key takeaway here. Real preparedness is about both the physical stuff and the human stuff. A building that can withstand an earthquake is great, but it's not much help if the staff doesn't know the emergency plan, or if all the critical medical gear isn't bolted down and gets smashed to pieces. The people and the plans are just as vital as the concrete and steel. And we've got data that shows what a huge difference this makes. A study of hospitals in Iran found one area had really low structural compliance, just over 31%, and their overall preparedness was less than 50%. But in another study, 15 other hospitals managed to achieve an 86.7% preparedness reading. It proves that even though the gaps can be massive, getting to a high level of readiness is absolutely achievable. And that brings us right back to the most basic, most powerful call to action. It comes from the preface of the Bihar report itself. The author, Dr. Anand Arya, couldn't have said it any clearer. Whatever is built now must be earthquake resistant. That's it. That's the clear, non-negotiable starting line for making the future safer. When you boil it all down, all the numbers and maps lead to this one final thought. The work of saving lives in a future earthquake doesn't begin after the shaking stops. It begins right now. It starts years, decades before. It's built into every new building code, practiced in every disaster drill, and shared in every public warning. A city's resilience is built long before the ground ever starts to shake. So the question we all have to ask is ours ready?